good evening, everyone. I hope you're having a good evening. Let me know if everything is working okay as far as volume. If you're out there listening, it seems like everything is okay. We haven't done this in a couple of weeks, so trying to get back in the groove. I apologize for last week. We did not have any internet service. So I think if you lived in the Pleasant View area, not only did I not have any internet service to be able to broadcast, I don't think you had any internet service where you could have listened anyway. So I know the internet was really out last week. It was out sometimes during the day on Wednesday, and then Wednesday night it went out and didn't come back on until about 7:40, I guess. But anyway, thanks for tuning in tonight. Hope that you're out there. I am monitoring the Facebook pages, Gospel Chariot, and also Clarksville Highway Church. I'm also monitoring the YouTube channel. So if you have a comment, you can throw something in there, or the good old-fashioned way, if you have my phone number, you can send me a text, or you can, I don't care, you can give me a phone call if you want to, and we'll do it that way. But tonight we're going to look at 2 John. It's a very short book. We're going to look at 2 John this week. Next week we're going to look at 3 John. All right, so good evening, starting everyone. The week after that, I'm going to start a series on good people don't go to heaven. And I hope you tune in for that. We're excited about that. Music is still playing. I have no idea where that's coming from. Trying to get back in the groove. I apologize for last week. So hang on a second. Let me see if I can figure that out. So I think if you lived in the Pleasant View area, not only did I not have any internet service to be able to broadcast, I don't think you had any internet. Okay, so you're probably a couple of minutes behind me, but I think I figured that out. So sorry about that. I had forgotten to mute the YouTube channel. So since I didn't mute the YouTube channel, you were hearing me again, which means you're probably going to hear a lot of echo, and I apologize for that. Sorry about it, but I think I got it cleared up. Let me fix one other thing really quickly here. I know you don't want to see that, but don't y'all love it when I have technical issues? All right, so I think we're back to good now. So a couple of things there. I guess you got to see how some things go on behind the scene. I was trying to get rid of that little box up there, but the lighting in here is doing something really weird and really funny. So we won't worry about that too much. We will just jump into the Bible program, and you can see my computer screen there. Sorry about that. Got rid of that. So here we go. Music is off good now. Again, apologize for that, but we have it going correctly. So hi to Travis, hi to Linda. Glad you guys are joining in, and looking forward to 2 John. And hey, at the very beginning, it's only 13 verses. I just want to read it. One of the reasons I was doing 2 and 3 John is sometimes I think they get a little bit neglected. I mean, we get into all of these books, and you get to 2 and 3 John, and they're short. And it just seems like sometimes we just kind of skip over them. And I did not want to do that. I wanted to, I just want to take a couple of weeks and talk about them. So 2 John, I'm going to read through, make a couple of comments, and then we'll come back and talk about it. The elder. Now, the elder has two possibilities there, and I'll just give you both of them. You can discern for yourself which one it's supposed to be. Probably a combination of both, actually. It could mean the elder, it could be just the older man, the older gentleman. It could be used that way, or it could be used as an elder, which like a church office, as an elder of the church. So whichever way you want to look at that. I don't think it's a big difference, whichever one you choose. I think they go hand in hand. You can probably just understand it to be both of them. Maybe an older gentleman who's serving as an elder in the church, maybe just a church office, maybe just an older man. But anyway, the elder, to the chosen lady and her children. And just very quickly, the chosen lady could either be an individual, Or it could be the way that John is addressing a church. I actually think it's probably the way he's addressing a church, but again, it doesn't make a lot of difference how you take that. Either way is fine. So the elder to the chosen lady and her children, whom I love in the truth, and not I only, but also all those who know the truth, because of the truth which lives in us and will be with us forever. Grace, mercy, and peace from God the Father and from Jesus Christ, the Father's Son, will be with us in truth and love. It has given me great joy to find some of your children walking in the truth, just as the Father commanded us. And now, dear lady, I am not writing you a new command, but one we have had from the beginning. And I ask that we love one another. And this is love, that we walk in obedience to his commands, as you have heard from the beginning. His command is that you walk in love. Many deceivers who do not acknowledge Jesus Christ as coming in the flesh have gone out into the world. Any such person is the deceiver and the Antichrist. Watch out that you do not lose what you have worked for, but that you may be rewarded fully. Anyone who runs ahead and does not continue in the teaching of Christ does not have God. Whoever continues in the teaching has both the Father and the Son. If anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, do not take him into your house or welcome him. Anyone who welcomes him shares in his wicked work. I have much to write to you, but I do not want to use paper and ink. Instead, I hope to visit you and talk with you face to face so that our joy may be complete. The children of your chosen sister send their greetings. And by the way, that last verse, the children of your chosen sister send their greetings. I think that's one of the indications that John is using sister as congregations of the church, as meeting churches that are meeting in houses. But anyway, it was kind of an interesting book, and I want to balance tonight, if I can. I want us to talk about balancing faith, balancing love and truth. It was interesting. I put this picture up last week when I was getting ready to teach this class. I put this slide presentation together last week because of that. And this is in 2014 when Diane and I went to see the Leaning Tower of Pisa. And actually, I thought it was kind of strange. I get an email from Google Photos, Google Drive. And when I got my email today, it kind of reminds you of pictures, right? And it said, on this day, so this is actually in 2014, this was the day that we actually went to the Leaning Tower of Pisa. I remember we went to Rome on Diane's birthday, and then we went to the Leaning Tower of Pisa today. So that's kind of appropriate that we have that. But it's just that kind of concept of leaning. And I was just looking at that picture as we were talking about that. I guess everybody takes that picture. I don't know. I guess everybody that goes to the Leaning Tower of Pisa takes a picture like that. If you went there and you didn't take that picture, let me know, because we did. I guess everybody does. If you don't keep truth and love, which are two of the things that John writes about in 2 John, if you don't keep truth and love in perspective, if you don't keep them in a really good balance, then things can just kind of get out of hand. I was trying to think of ways to do that, so I thought about this scale thing too. Maybe you could think about that in the balance and keeping them perfectly balanced out if you would like to this. But most of us actually tend to lean in one direction or another. I also thought, well, I can use a pendulum, so I took this video of a pendulum swinging. And I think most of us, as we go through life, it's very hard for us to stay in the middle. Our pendulum tends to swing from one extreme or from one side to the next side. For example, tonight we're talking about truth and love. And if you look at church history, I think if we're not careful trying to balance Grace and faith is another one of those areas where the pendulum, it seems to swing from one side to the other. It's very hard to keep it in the middle. I mean, it just doesn't stop there. But on the Leaning Tower of Pisa, I meant to tell you that I had to look up which year they started to build that. It was in 1173, and it took them 5 years to build the first 3 stories. And so then it began to shift because of the clay and the sand and the shells. But they kept building it there. We ended up with the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and I'm sure somebody could text in and tell us what they did to help the foundation, to give it strength and all those kind of things. I don't remember all of that. I just remember seeing it. I remember there was a big pool out in front of it. Anyway, that's not that important. But if we can't keep truth and love balanced, some very strange things can happen for us in the church. You can, if you have truth, but you don't have love, you can be harsh. I mean, you can hold on to a godly teaching, to a godly truth, but do that in a very ungodly way. I mean, you can treat those who disagree with you unfairly. You can treat them with contempt. You can treat them with rudeness. If you don't balance truth and love. And then people who are outside the church and they see us bickering and fighting and yelling and screaming and not talking to one another. And I mean, that's where you run across those statements where people say, well, I sure don't want to be like those people. Or they begin to identify us as uncaring or intolerant or self-centered. Maybe they identify with us being argumentative. And when those things happen, if we don't deal with truth with love, then we bring reproach on Christ's church. And we turn away the very people whom Christ has sent us into the world to teach, and we alienate those for whom Christ died. So we have to be very careful that we balance the truth that we have with love. On the other hand, if we have too much love and that's not anchored in truth, then if we're not careful, our truth starts to conform to the world and it doesn't have a solid foundation. So we shy away maybe from the holiness and the dedication that God deserves. So we might not insist on godly living and godly changes. It's true. God accepts us where we are, but He also loves us too much to just leave us where we are. He calls us to something that's far different. And so love has more to do than just kind of putting our needs and wants aside and condoning doctrine and behavior that God doesn't condone. So if we use love as an excuse to allow ungodly behavior, then our love is not balanced by truth. And if we hold on to our truth in an abusive, ungodly way, then our truth is not balanced by love, which is why I think John, in 2 John, when he comes and he starts to talk about this, he said, whom I love in the truth. And if you look through 2 John, just take your pen and start marking the truth and the love statements in there, and you'll find 4 or 5 where he is trying to balance those two things together, because we need truth and love. We need this solid foundation. So what kind of lessons can we draw from 2 John? And let me check, make sure there's not a comment out there that I need to respond to. Number one, I think we just need to be very careful that we live by truth and love. There's this great verse in 1 Corinthians chapter 8 right here. He's talking about food sacrificed to idols, and through the discourse that he has here, through the teaching that Paul gives us in 1 Corinthians chapter 8, you might have the right to do something, but if you insist on doing something based on your knowledge, and then you cause your brother to stumble who doesn't have the same knowledge that you have, maybe he doesn't have, or she doesn't have the same spiritual maturity that you have. And Paul is addressing that with food sacrificed to idols. And we know these passages, we've read them in the past, but if it's going to cause my brother to stumble, to just soon not to eat, right? He says in context of that, we know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge puffs up, but love builds up. And so we need to really work hard on using our love balanced with truth and truth balanced with love to build one another up. So if we live by the truth, that it means we live by God's revelation of the gospel to us through Jesus Christ, and we live by the standards that are contained in it. I mean, it's probably John, I think, when he writes this, is probably thinking about something that he wrote earlier in 1 John, when he talks about living in the light. And so if you live in the light, you live in harmony with God. If you walk in the light, and to live in the light is to keep the commandments of God. So if we think about that, and maybe even, I wrote this down. He had a teaching in 1 John chapter 3, verse 23. This is his command, to believe in the name of his son, Jesus Christ, and to love one another as he commanded us. That's just a beautiful verse, because John condenses the gospel down to something very simple. We believe in the name of the Son, Jesus Christ, and we love one another as he commanded us. And if we believe in Christ, if we love Christ, then when we love Christ, we also follow the examples that he has set, and we follow the truth that he's given us. It's this idea of we have truth, and that's consistent with the revelation of Jesus and the revelation of his message. So when John talks about that, he talks about us loving in truth. So, I mean, honestly, a good question is, so what is truth, right? And truth is living in that way that we just looked at, that's consistent with the revelation of Jesus and consistent with the message that he has sent. And ultimately that truth is Jesus is the Son of God. And if we believe that truth, if we hold on to the fact that Jesus is the Son of God, it shapes and changes every other thing in our life. I mean, it's like the spoke of a wheel, and I mean, the hub of a wheel, and you got the spokes that go out in different directions, but the very hub of that is living in a way that brings honor and truth to God through living out the message and the revelation of Jesus Christ. And I really like this section, and he says, because of the truth which lives in us and will be with us forever. And I mean, I love that, because if you start thinking, how is it that truth is going to be with us forever? And you say, well, if you look at it from maybe just the concept of the Bible, if the Bible is truth, and by the way, I do believe that the Bible is truth, okay? But the Bible is God's revelation to show us how to live in this world. The truth that is going to be with us forever is the truth that Jesus is the Son of God. The reality of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, will be with us forever, because when this life is over, when Jesus comes again and he comes on the clouds, the Jesus that comes on the clouds is the Jesus that was resurrected from the grave and has a resurrected body and sits at the right hand of the throne of God. So the Jesus who comes is the Jesus who is the Son of God in the flesh. So he's the same yesterday, today, and forever. He is that truth will never escape us. All of the time that we are sharing with God in eternity, there is going to be Jesus, the Son of God, who gave his life on the cross that enabled us to have that life with the Father that lasts forever. So that truth, the reality of who Jesus is, will be with us forever. So that's what I mean by living in a way that's consistent with the message of Jesus and the revelation of Jesus. But if we're not careful, when we go through life, we can allow other people to somehow start to redefine truth. Now, and it doesn't matter if it's a religious person or a political figure. I mean, in our world, the world that we live in right now, actors and actresses and athletes have a tremendous amount of influence. and they have opinions, and which is great, but you can't allow someone outside of the revelation of Jesus Christ to redefine what truth is for you. Truth is found in the revelation, the message, the life of Jesus Christ. So if you start to struggle with that and you start trying to figure out, okay, if I'm looking at this, if I'm looking at whatever it is, maybe it's a decision in your life, maybe it's a law on a ballot that you have to vote yes or no for, maybe it's the way that you're going to treat somebody. Whatever you're doing, you define truth by understanding who Jesus is and living your life in a way that's consistent with who he is and just living like him. You know, we can easily define truth by what makes me feel good. So the thing that makes me happy, then that has to be the thing that's truth. But that's not the thing that's truth. Truth is not the thing that makes me happy. In fact, sometimes what God calls us to is situations in life that actually make us uncomfortable. And if there's an ungodly behavior, but the ungodly behavior makes me happy, truth isn't the ungodly behavior. Truth is always defined by the message of Jesus and the revelation of who he is. We might look at something and say, well, you know, it's a thing that doesn't bring conflict in life, but the thing that doesn't bring conflict in life is not truth either. Or you know, say, well, if we love somebody, we won't make them feel bad. Well, sometimes loving someone means that we have to share something with them that maybe they don't like, or they don't want to hear, or they don't really want to listen to. The point of all of that is we walk by love and truth is defined by what God defines truth as, and he has the right to do that. He created us, he spoke us into existence. Without him, we would not have anything that we have, either spiritually or physically. We were not here when the Spirit of God was hovering over the expanse and he said, let there be light. I mean, everything that is created is his. So he's the creator, he's the ultimate good, and he can define truth. And our challenge is to go through life allowing God to define truth. There's this passage in 1 John. Dear friends, if our hearts do not condemn us, we have confidence before God and receive from him anything we ask, because we obey his commands and do what pleases him. And this is his command, to believe in the name of his son Jesus Christ and to love one another as he commanded us. That we looked at that just a few minutes ago in the text. So we balance this truth and love. So how is it that what does love look like if that's what truth looks like? And you know, I think truth can show itself love can show itself in a lot of different ways. But if we say, okay, then we want to love one another. Now, ultimately, love for God, if somebody says, and John writes this in 1 John, if somebody says, I love God, but doesn't obey God's commands, then that person doesn't love God. The person who loves God follows God's commands. The person who loves God honors God with their life. So when we start to love one another, the first thing about that, I think, is we look at others' needs above our own needs. And you know, I think you see that so many ways in our society. I mean, hopefully you see it in the way that a parent treats a child, and hopefully you would see how a child treats a parent. You should see it in the church, in the way that we treat one another. If I am always looking for your need and trying to meet your need first, I'm going to be very much less concerned about what I want and what I need if I'm concentrating on serving your needs. So I think one of the ways that we see that is we just see people who are taking care of one another and looking out for one another and share things with one another. It doesn't mean that we always agree to have love, but it means that even in our disagreement, we can still have a loving attitude toward one another. I mean, I think one of the things, kind of a pet peeve in our society that may not be true, it's just the way I perceive it. But the way I perceive things right now, it seems like it's difficult sometimes in our society for two people with different viewpoints to sit down and have a respectful conversation when they disagree on a topic or on a point. And I think that's a much needed skill, and I almost think it's a lost art for our society, for our culture. So how is it that we practice love? We practice love by only doing what God tells us to do, and we show love the way that God shows love for us. I mean, you just think about Jesus. You know, someone came to Jesus. What's the greatest commandment? Well, greatest commandment: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind. The second's like it: love your neighbor as yourself. I mean, he summed all of the prophets, all of the law up in the two statements: love God and love your neighbor, love your brother. And so Jesus comes along and he says, if you love me, you'll keep my commandments. So when John writes 2 John and he comes down here, it gives me great joy to find your children walking in the truth, just as our Father commanded us. And I'm not writing a new command, but one we've had from the beginning: love one another. And this is love, that we walk in obedience to his commands. So that should be who we are, and that should be what we're about. So he goes on. I spend all of our time in that, right? But there are a couple of statements in here that I just wanted to take a little bit of time and talk about for a minute. First is this deceiver and Antichrist. And so the person who is the deceiver and the Antichrist is those who do not acknowledge Jesus Christ as coming in the flesh. And many of those have gone out into the world, John tells us. And the reason that is so important is Jesus of Nazareth was not just a great teacher. He wasn't just another man. He wasn't just a great rabbi or a great student of Old Testament law. He wasn't just a radically different, unique teacher that just had a totally new insight into the law and the things that God wanted. Jesus, the Son of God, is the Son of God in the flesh. I mean, it's testified by the virgin birth. It's testified at his baptism when the Spirit descends on him, and my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased. It is testified by the miracles that he performs at the transfiguration, at what happens in the garden, ultimately at what happens in the cross, and most dramatically by what happens at the resurrection. So he is Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews, the Son of God, and nothing less than the Son of God and the Savior of the world. So if there is a teaching that goes out that teaches Jesus Christ was not the Son of God in the flesh, that undermines, that destroys all of the message about who Jesus is. Jesus was the incarnate Son of God who came and gave his life on the cross for the sins as the ransom for the people. And John says you cannot deviate from that truth. And so it's extremely important. If you see anybody who doesn't have that truth, you have to be very careful. You have to watch out so that you don't lose what. And there's I was reading from the NIV 1984. It says you do not lose what you have worked for. Some other translations there will have you do not lose what we have worked for. Just a textual variant there, just so you know if you're reading from a different translation. The question is what John has worked for, what the people that he's writing to has worked for. How do you lose that? and you lose that when you lose the message that Jesus is the Son of God who came in the flesh. So if we have separation from the truth of Jesus, who he is, and what he taught, if you get separated from that, then that's how you lose what you have worked for so hard, because all of your spiritual blessings are found in the person of Jesus Christ. And if anyone, if you run ahead, okay, if you don't continue in the teaching of Christ, you don't have God. And this phrase, teaching of Christ, that could mean a couple of different things. It could mean the teaching that Christ gave. In other words, if you don't continue in the teaching of Christ, it is what he taught us while he was on earth, and what he taught us through the apostles, what we're supposed to do. The other possibility, it's teaching about Christ. So it's the teaching of which the subject of the teaching is Christ. And I tend to lean, I didn't mean to get off that, I tend to lean to the second one more, because if you lose the teaching about Christ, the teaching of who Christ is, and both of those are important. I mean, don't split straws over this, okay? But if you don't continue in understanding who Jesus is, and you get outside of that, you get outside of understanding Jesus Christ, the Son of God, who came in the flesh to die on the cross for your sin, then if you don't find forgiveness in Jesus, you're not going to find it anywhere else. I mean, it is only found in the person of Jesus Christ. So don't run ahead. Don't get outside of that teaching. So if anyone comes to you and does not bring this teaching, do not take him into your house or welcome him. Anyone who welcomes him shares in his wicked work. I think this teaching that he's talking about does not bring this teaching. I think it'd be a combination of things. It could be, get a slide here. It could be the teaching of that he has talked about in the passage before, Jesus in the flesh, that Jesus is the Son of God. It could be the teaching that we love one another. It could be the teaching of Christ, that is the teaching that Christ gave us. I think in context, it's probably the first one. It is Jesus, the Son of God in the flesh. So if anybody comes to you and they don't bring the message of Jesus Christ, the Son of God who came in the flesh, then you don't take him into your house. You don't welcome him. And the wording here, it's kind of having the attitude of, may it go well with you. May you find success in what you do. May God bless you in what you do. And John, even to the point, don't even greet them and say hello to them and pronounce any kind of blessing on them at all. Don't be a part of that teaching. Now that doesn't mean that we treat them disrespectfully, or it doesn't mean that we treat them, we treat people in some kind of evil way. We don't accept their teaching. We don't support their teaching. We don't try to help with their teaching. We preserve the truth at all cost. We might rebuke them. We might teach against them. I think as you think about that, you just think back to the way that Jesus dealt with the Pharisees. I mean, he dealt with the Pharisees in a way that was firm, that was truthful. He didn't allow them, or he didn't share in their incorrect teaching. And they did, by the way, at least some of them reject the Son of God in the flesh. But he called out their teaching. He said, unless you believe that I am, you will die in your sins. But at the same time, he was sensitive. He was responsive. He was trying to show them the truth. He was trying to win them over. He was trying to help them to see the reality of what they were missing. So we don't support them. We don't help them. We don't do anything that would cause them or help them to spread their message. But at the same time, we don't close the book to a point that we can't talk with them, try to explain to them that Jesus Christ is the Son of God who came in the flesh. So that idea of sharing is kind of connotes maybe some kind of connotates some kind of continuous action, but you don't do those kind of things. There is a truth that we cannot compromise on, and one of those truths that we cannot compromise on is the understanding that Jesus Christ was the Son of God who came in the flesh. And understanding that and seeing it the way that he changes our life and how Jesus came into the world full of grace and truth and love, when we live out our time in this world, we must live it with the same love and truth that Jesus had as he lived out his life. So we need to become exactly like him in all things. So kind of to sum that up, I think here are a couple of just quick lessons from Second John. Again, it's short but really powerful book. Don't let humanity, meaning anything outside of the message that God has given us, outside of God's inspiration, don't let humanity redefine truth. If you want to know what truth is, look at the text, look at the Bible, look at the teachings of Jesus, look at the teachings of the early church, and define truth. And we know that truth is to treat one another in love. It's to treat one another with respect. It's not to backbite or to try to tear down, but it's to build up and to encourage. And sometimes to live in truth means that we have to tell people the truth. I mean, sometimes we have to tell people things that they don't want to hear. I mean, I'm thinking particularly about church leaders. If we see someone living in an ungodly way and we don't warn them about their ungodly way, then we'll be judged for that. And I don't mean we do it harshly and disrespectfully. We even in correction, that second word there, truth and love, even in correction, we have to be full of love, watching and guarding ourselves, knowing that even though we are correcting someone, it would be very easy for us in that correction to slip into the same type of sin, right? So we balance truth with love, and we don't let anyone else define that. We don't let humanity define that. We let God define what truth and love look like. And for God so loved the world, he gave his one and only son. And so that's what love looks like. Even when we were sinners, Christ died for us. We know that's what love looks like. We know that love looks like people who seek the needs of other people above their own needs. That's what love looks like. So we hang on to truth, and we don't compromise on truth, but we balance it with love, and we try to keep those balanced as we go through life. And we do that by looking at the example of Jesus. But in doing that, we don't let humanity define who Jesus is either. Jesus is not a great teacher, just a rabbi, or he's not just someone who was just, had just unique insight into Scripture. Jesus is the Son of God in the flesh. He was and he is and he will continue to be. And so we don't let humanity define who that is. So when John writes Second John, I think it's later. I think it's later in his life. I think he's probably in his 90s when he writes it, maybe. And I think he writes it in such a way that there's some persecution going on. The truth is maybe beginning to get a little bit vague in some places, and he is trying to call this church back to the reality of the things that are important, and that is to know the truth and to walk in it, to love God, which means to obey his commands and the truth that he's given us, and to hang on to the teaching of Jesus, knowing that Jesus is truly the Son of God who came into the world. So that was just a really quick overview of 2 John. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope you learned something from it. I'm going to look and see if we have any comments. And I don't see any. If I missed any text messages. Nope, didn't miss any text messages. So, hey, I hope you enjoyed that. Tune in Sunday morning. We are in the book of Zechariah. So if you're going to listen to the live stream Sunday morning or be part of the Sunday morning class in the auditorium, read Zechariah. Read the 3rd, 4th, and 5th chapters. That'll pretty much take care of what we're going to talk about Sunday morning. We will live stream Sunday at 10 o'clock for worship. So please tune in for that. We are looking at the book of Ephesians, and understanding our identity and talk about what the church is and why the church is so important to God and how the church fits within the history of the world. So excited about that. I know it is 4th of July weekend, so many of you will be traveling and doing things. Just ask that you be safe. All right, be safe in your travels, and hopefully you'll tune in again, and we'll be able to have another class. So have a great evening, and I will see you on Sunday morning.